Dan buenas dan mananas idus para todos hamzani mangagi pagugini na ogan dan todo lo ko imane ekungi airi gano huzong mangagi gwini talo para ta continua este dumiskuti i manera ni ginagagaw i administrasyon para i necesidad i departamentos ani hensya ni para fanwana i publiko ni serbisyo ni ginagagaw gilay todos. Manggagit talo gwini data continuas na hearing ni i tau administrasyon gi esti maneran sa lapi gagi gini pago i BBMR dan i revenue tax pues si dus masi todos gagi loki siya mangatsongo pago na ogan manggagi gwini no ni man hahami funeni na nun matu na ogan za kalantori tempo guiza funena mafatu si Senator Eileen Yamsia. Pues gagilo que si Senator Tony Ada dan si Senator Chris Dueñas, the Guau si Senator Ben Pangilinan. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to continue the FY 2012 budget hearing as requested by the administration for the provision of the financial resources necessary for the departments and agencies of the government of Guam to provide the public service that is required by statutes and laws of our territory. We want to thank the directors of the Bureau of Budget and Management and the Director of Revenue and Tax for joining us this morning. BBMR is also accompanied by members of their management team, so we want to thank them again for their presence this morning. This is a continuation hearing. We're going to, in the last hearing, we talked about expenditures and some of the projections on the revenue side. This hearing will be on the current operations plus, of course, the projected revenues for FY 2013. That remains open for discussion based upon previous discussions. There were some questions that we may have had and requested for clarifications. I also want to thank Senator Mana Silva Tyrone for joining us this morning and certainly welcome her to this hearing. Let's just go ahead and let me, if I may, just kind of follow up on a couple of issues that I thought that we had asked at the last hearing and wanted to get some clarification on the revenue side. I had noted in the revenue projections for the upcoming fiscal year an increase of approximately $8 million in the real estate taxes, the Territorial Educational Facilities Fund. Mr. Rios had outlined some general areas of projects and initiatives being undertaken by Rev and Tax to account for that additional revenue. And I wanted to give an opportunity for the Director of Revenue and Tax to kind of maybe give us some additional details on some of those initiatives and why we feel confident that we can go into FY 2013 increasing the revenue projections or the projected revenue collections in the Territorial Educational Facilities Fund funded by the real estate taxes to the tune of $8 million. What are those initiatives? And then maybe open them up for additional questions of any members of the panel that we may have. So, John, Mr. Camacho, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Senator and members of the committee. I guess although I didn't get the breakdown on the real estate and all the other revenue enhancements that we predicted for the moving forward for FY 2013 and beyond, I do recall that part of the real estate enhancement involves our tax mapping projects that we've been doing, the real estate projects that we've been doing on the other side. And also, I think the biggest one that we're really looking at is the revaluation of the entire properties of Guam that we're doing right now. So I believe there's roughly about $7 to $10 million within that range moving forward that we're anticipating for revenues or increasing the real property tax as well as real estate taxes.
So you anticipate that the administration is going to increase real estate tax or will cause, in some of its initiatives, cause real estate taxes? I mean, the assessments themselves will not not increase, correct?
Um, to start off, some of the revenues that we're seeing already involves the tax mapping project that we've been doing lately, last year, and moving forward. That I believe has generated a bit some increase in real property tax. The bulk of it basically is going to come from the revaluation of the real property tax. And again, the outcome of that will basically, if the value of the properties in Guam actually increases by 20 to 30%, then naturally you're going to see an increase in taxes, unless otherwise we decide to adjust the rates. So I believe the estimated amount that we were looking at on the revaluation, I think, is around $7 million, if I recall. And that's something that we were looking if the properties were actually valued at least 30% more, 20 to 30% more.
John, when we kind of compare the last time the valuation was done, on which the current tax is assessed, the current mill rate, I guess, is in the states they refer to as mill rates, and I guess that would be proper to refer them in here. So the current mill rate, we refer, we apply the percentage against the value of the property. The last time they were assessed was it the 1993 or the 95 valuation?
I think it's 93.
93. So, and we've seen real estate go up and down, in the last 20 years, I guess, because it'll be almost 20 years since the last valuation was done. When you kind of look at that valuation, wouldn't you say 93 was kind of like more peak than valley, and that are we back up to that peak? I mean, the 1993 valuations may have seen two Mon Bay properties selling for $1,500 a square meter. Are we there now with regards to the market rates on these properties? I think the last time I saw, for example, like an Hagatna lot that was sold, a two Mon Bay lot that was sold, I don't think it's come back up to that peak. So would it be, you think it'll be accurate to say that we would be above that peak that was in 93, you think?
Well, it's really hard to really predict until the outcome really comes out. My staff has been looking at a lot of the numbers. Right now there's a law that requires an affidavit if there's a sale that actually occurs on Guam,
right?
And that affidavit would actually disclose the value of the property,
right?
And when they look at that, and especially for the commercial, it was pretty high from my understanding from my staff. But again, I can't really say right now. This is just an estimation, but when the actual revaluation actually comes up, where the experts will actually come out, that's the number that we should rely on.
So the time frame for involved in this would be when do you think this project will be completed, and would it cover the entire tax year and liability based upon the new valuation in FY 2013, or you think it's going to be prorated? So that have we prorated the $7 million in terms of the bulk of the increase? Are we looking at a $14 million increase, but we're saying it'd be only for that half year, or we're only going to collect 50% of the new valuation? Is that an adjusted number, or is that a gross number?
Well, the $7 million was basically just an estimation of what we anticipate the increase in value of the property. Okay. As far as the question whether this would increase the 2013, we're looking at that.
Okay.
Hopefully we can complete the right now we're under phase 1. We're gathering all the data. We're basically updating our records, and the second phase that will be coming out will basically the hiring the appraisers to come in and value the properties.
I understand, but Mr. Rios, Are did you coordinate the time frame? Because John's saying that we still got to hire the appraisers. They've still got to value the properties, correct?
Yes, yes.
But you want to spend the money already, or the governor has included it in his FY 2000 to spend this additional $7 million, and he's cleverly gave it all to DOE, so that if they don't collect, DOE doesn't get $7 million. Can we afford that risk, or are you satisfied with the risk that Rev Tax will complete the entire project in this fiscal year, will collect the additional 7, and we won't end up having to scramble for DOE's additional 7 or 7 million coming out of the TEFF additional collections, not the current collections?
That's correct, and that is the assumption.
Oh, okay.
That is the assumption that we will have it completed by next fiscal year. And not only that, but it was to basically cover the 10 million increase on the Department of Education budget for fiscal year 2012. So we wanted to make sure that at least the Department of Education was at the same level as they were in 2012.
That's well, if we agree with your assumption and we adopt this number, and we don't, for whatever reason there's a glitch and we collect half and so forth, is the administration going to come back and say it's a bad budget, or because we agreed with you, or we're going to say, how are you going to handle making up that deficiency if there should be a glitch in this whole project that causes us not to collect the $7 million?
We do have other revenue enhancement, but I'm assuming we're talking about the Territorial Educational Fund.
Yes, correct.
So the other revenue enhancements would specifically talk about other funds, which is basically mainly the general fund.
Okay.
So I may add that we're trying our best to see what we can do to try and because the law actually requires the department to actually put out a preliminary assessment by September 1st every year. So it's time frame is an issue right now for our department, and making that time frame is right now it's we're running short. So we're probably looking at the 2013 tax year for any revaluation to actually happen.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put in the budget that only Mr. Rios and Mr. Camacho can speak to this matter out of the governor's office if we should miss the target.
Well, you gotta also remember that we also did this back in December of
Yes, I
last
understand.
year. So
Okay. I want to also thank Senator Ada for joining us, Tom Ada, for joining us this morning. Welcome, Senator Ada. The other question I have, John, is we've received several inquiries from individuals talking about real estate tax, and maybe this is one of the revenue enhancement issues that, or initiatives that the Department of Revenue and Taxation has taken upon the, I guess, direction of the governor, or certainly approval of the governor. But we're getting some individuals who are bringing to us copies of tax notices of agricultural exemptions on properties that now individuals have to present receipts of agricultural income on their income tax, or that they no longer are eligible for this agricultural exemption. Is that was I guess, can you explain that a little bit? My understanding of that is that I guess that's part of the assessments being done or reevaluation being done.
Yes, that's correct. I think if I recall earlier this year, sometimes in March, we wanted to look at the farm exemptions, how actually those exemptions were actually submitted and applied, and we wanted to clarify the meaning of farm bona fide farm, and,
right.
and our attorney at that time, we were looking at those definitions of what a bona fide farm is, a farmer that's been active for at least 8 months out of the year. And we wanted to clarify that, so we issued a letter notifying all the farm exemptions holders to basically come in and if they have any issues or basically what type of farming they have and the requirement that we're actually imposing on this and we gave them since March.
Right.
So some of them did come in. Some of them did come in and says, I'm not really a true farmer. Right. I just grew a few vegetables in my backyard, and at the time again we were stressing that there are other benefits that other than farm exemptions. For example, the home exemptions, and if you're 55 or older, you can apply it in time to actually basically take the benefit. So. Some of them came in. I don't know the numbers. They came in and they said, okay, I'm not really a farmer. I don't produce vegetable for the eight months out of the year. So we cleared a lot of that, and then we just gave them a second letter again, basically giving them a second chance to really come in and say we're really operating out of the 8 months, be a commercial farmer or actually farming.
Yeah.
And then. I think the last is where if those people didn't come in and actually submitted a new farm exemptions, I guess in conjunction with the Department of Agriculture saying that they're really farmers, we're going to actually deny them.
Right, so you'd reverse the exemption.
Yes, but a lot of them that were taking the farm exemptions through their personal residence are coming in and just applying for the home exemption, and if they're 55 or older, they're applying also for the senior citizens.
So it might even be a negative hit to the farm, because if they get a farmer's exemption and they didn't have a homeowners and they didn't have a senior citizen, now you reverse that farm exemption, but you give them a homeowner and a senior citizen. Would that equal the farm exemption, or would that still be less than the farm exemption?
It still be less, because
the farm
80% is for the senior citizens. That's if they're 55 or older.
Right.
And the home exemption, you're only given 175, which is the first 50,000, I believe,
yes, of
exemptions as a credit.
Yes.
So. But the point here is basically what we're trying to do is to actually enforce what really farming is.
Sure.
It's not something that we hear a lot, where you grow a few crops in your backyard and the value of your house is worth $200,000, or the whole property is worth and you don't pay anything.
The farm exemption, was that confined to property that was zone agricultural, or could the farm exemption apply to Kaiser?
Well, it has the definition of where, and it has the definition from the agricultural side of what a bona fide farmer is, and it mentions a little bit about being commercially used.
Yeah.
So in essence, that was really the intent, is
sure,
to really impose what the definition of a true farmer is versus somebody that's just actually growing crops in the backyard,
right,
or a garden.
Yeah. Okay. So you think that will be a positive increase in the collections to the Territorial Educational Facilities Fund?
Well, again, there's depending on and I don't have the numbers, because if half of them were to qualify for only the home exemption, then you see some positive revenues coming in, which they only be allowed, a full credit of $175.
Right.
But I just don't know the numbers right now. But I think it should be a positive issue or initiative that we're doing for the fund itself.
Okay. And based upon the advice of the attorneys, all of that, because we were looking at that at the request of some of the constituents, and some of them were statutorily granted, and without changes in those statutes, that the initiative you may be trying to impose may not be possible without amendments to the law?
Well, under the exemption rules, I got to go back to the legal counsel, but we looked at it, and that's the reason why we had this three-phase communication
Okay.
with the holders.
Yes, I know.
One is to initially let them know that we're making the change. Secondly, we just want to say second reminder.
Yes.
And this third one that really has to happen, which is today,
Yes.
that they'll receive a notice that these things have been denied.
Yes, I understand, and you know, I want to thank.
And to even to that, there's administrative rights or procedures, which is they have the right to actually appeal this to the
Appeal.
Board of Equalization.
That's
Yes.
correct. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure, and I do want to thank the department for the notice that you've phased in and given opportunities for these individuals to come in. So I know that I just dealt with a constituent who had, I think today or yesterday was your last day, right, for coming in for like that second notice. I think it was July 30th first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because today, by law, we need to issue a certified letter.
Right.
And
Denying.
again, if the taxpayer, basically did not make the deadline, because there's deadlines that you have to submit application, then
Right.
there's always another year that you can come in, and everybody's welcome to come in and submit another application if they meet the requirements.
Okay. All right. Any questions on the real estate side? Yeah. Okay, John, I wanted to kind of then go back to the provisions for refunds that was included in this current budget. This year, of course, we have a provision for refunds of about $105 million for fiscal year FY 2012. We've reduced that amount in the FY 2013 to $100 million. Can you explain why we've reduced it to $100 million for FY 2012 tax year liability?
Part of the reduction basically that we're seeing is, and I guess, provisions for refunds are really an estimation
Sure.
in law. And one of the reasons why the provisions were a little bit larger in the previous years because of the making work pay credit.
Mm-hmm.
And since the making work pay has expired for moving forward, which was only applicable for tax year 2009 and 2010, we saw that there's going to be some decrease in the provisions for refund. So the law really requires basically an agreement between the Department of Revenue and Taxation, budget, and DOA
Right.
to come up with
Estimate.
an estimated amount, and we all agree with the $100 million.
You've all agreed to
Yes.
that number. The law was changed, though, recently that allowed the Income Tax Efficiency Payment Trust account to pay tax refunds, not confined to the fiscal year of the budget. Most recently, if I remember correctly, where we had informed the governor that he needed to pay refunds, whether they were prior year or current year, as long as he had money in that account, we should process the refunds and issue tax refund payments as we have money. And the governor continued to argue that he could not do that because the provision for refunds set aside in the current fiscal year budgets restricted him from paying prior year refunds with current year collections. And even though he had done it, a few months before that, he did it last year, where he took, current year collections and paid prior year refunds. But this year, when we had more money in the refund account, he insisted that he could not do that, even though he had already done that. And so the legislature, just to kind of make sure that people got their money and didn't argue any further, changed the law that said the collections and the deposits made in the Income Tax Efficiency Payment Trust account shall be available to pay all refunds, current or past due. And so don't we still owe some past due refunds other than for tax year 2012 going into fiscal year 2013? Won't we still owe some money? And I think you said maybe $36 million as of June or July?
Yes, I think part of that is for 2011 and
Right.
2010 and prior years. Yes.
So Mr. Rios and Mr. Camacho, wouldn't it make sense to, at the minimum, keep the provision for refunds at 105, since we may owe 100 million for tax year 2012, but we owe prior year refunds of 35, 36 million, and we can't borrow any more money to pay that 35, 36. Yet we're reducing the refund provision by $5 million with a past due liability of 36 million, facing a current year liability of 100 million. Where are we going to get that 35 if we don't set aside more than our estimate for the current tax year? How are we going to pay that 35 if we don't set aside a little bit more money? And wouldn't it make sense to keep, at the minimum, keep the provision the same at 105, so that maybe if we owe 100 million for 2012, but we have that 5, we can apply it towards the 2011, 2010 refund? Or does the governor plan on borrowing another? How are we going to pay up for those past due if we don't set aside a little bit more than the current liability? Any plans for that?
Again, you know, it could be 105, it could be 100 million, it could be 108.
Right.
But again, you know, this is where we all agreed that, you know, we want to use the $100 million provision for a refund. And again, every year the fund itself is been audited by, gets audited by the auditors, and in the event that the provisions is lower than it should be, then there's an adjustment, you know,
Right.
that's done every year. So again, this is something that we agreed moving forward, and I don't know if John wants to add to that.
Mr. Rios?
And also, I mean, you know, we were expecting really to make sure that we pay all the tax refunds. You know, unfortunately, there are other obligations on the bond that this legislature had rather use some of the funds to pay some of the other deficits, such as the promissory note or the retirement payments for DOE and GMH.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, yeah, that did occur, and it shortened the amount that we really needed to catch up on our tax refund payments.
Yeah. So what?
But you know, the 100. I mean, you know, I mean, we would do the same. I mean, if the revenues exceed projections, or if they come in projections, and we have additional funds to reduce the deficit, because that's what's going to happen for 12, is that all that 11 that hasn't been paid would be shown as part of the deficit, and we can use those additional revenues to go ahead and reduce the deficit or pay off the more of the tax refunds.
No, I understand that. I certainly appreciate that, but I was looking for something more definitive in terms of what that we are placing a priority on these refunds, and that we don't plan to spend everything we have and would only pay it if we had more money, you know, that we would attack the deficit from that perspective. And the deficit we're concerned about here is the past due refunds. We would attack that by setting aside current revenues to try and attack it. So
Fiscal stabilization and trying to hold the line, and
Okay.
being able to have some lapses at the end of the fiscal year would help also. That's
sure. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Senator Ara.
Thank you, Mr.
Tony?
Chair. Yeah, on the tax refunds, do we still have people that are filing like for 2009, 2010, and 11?
Yes, the law allows a taxpayer to file a claim up to 3 years from the due date. So, for example, right now we're in 2012, so returns that are for 8 is 9, 10, 11, 12. So 8 can still be filed, because 2008 would expire by 10, 11. I'm sorry, 9, because 9 is due on 2010. So it'll be 11, 12, 13. So 9 they can still file for 2009. I'm sorry.
Now, if an individual came in and filed for 2009 and 2010, do we still have funds to pay their tax refunds, or are they going to have to wait to get those funds, to get their refunds paid?
Right now, we are on a first in, first out. Basically, whoever files first and their returns become A status, meaning they're verified, those will go out first. In other words, like when we did the last big run from the bond, it went all the way up to April 10. But since we've been processing a lot of returns, we've been clearing a lot of error returns, suspended returns, people are coming in and clearing those things, we still go back to those due dates where they were actually filed. So moving forward, it always be first in, first out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Camacho, one of the questions we had asked DOA to provide us in terms of looking at current year expenditures and the issuance of the tax refunds was, how many unclaimed checks do we have, and what's the total value of those checks for the tax refunds? And the report we got was about $10 million. So there's $10 million in unclaimed tax refund checks supposedly sitting at the Department of Administration. And I don't know what we're doing to make sure that those people whose checks are waiting there are doing anything at all in terms of trying to reach these people. And I thought that, we kind of put out we kind of print the delinquent real estate tax and say, you owe us money, pay up. Couldn't we put a list together and publish it and say, we owe you money, come and get it? You know what I mean? And that way also it allows us to, because I'm assuming all of those are good. They were all A status, checks were cut, but the individuals, however, have not been notified or didn't know that they have a refund pending, or for whatever reason, there's $10 million in unclaimed tax refund checks sitting at the Department of Administration. Can I get some kind of commitment from yourself, Mr. Rios, and the DOA on how do we get that money to the people we owe? Some of them may have moved off island and didn't leave a forwarding address, but I'm sure that if they, Marvin, who's living in Houston, has been expecting his refunds, and then all of a sudden Marvin's sister living in Zonia sees his name. Hey, Marvin's got a refund. He's going to call Marvin, or she's going to call Marvin in Texas and say, dude, your refund's waiting at there, and they tried to get it to you, but they couldn't. So how and what kind of commitment can we get from this administration to really get the money to the people, and rather than just let it sit there?
And that's good. I mean, the first step, of course, was making sure they got their tax refunds.
That's correct.
And then now, I think maybe what we should do is we can meet and see if there are other options on those that cannot be located, to provide them their
put their name up on the website.
But,
maybe.
No, I don't know if we are allowed to do that, because that's disclosure. I mean, if you were to disclose a name, that's really a disclosure. I got to check with the legal company, but that under 6103, I think that's disclosing already somebody that's getting a refund, publicly, and I don't think that's possible. But I think what's possible is that we see we can work with the Postal Service, because the law only requires us that we issue that check to the last known address.
Right.
And one of the things that we're trying to work with is there's a procedure that we can go through, checking with the Postal Service. Is there any, first thing is the taxpayer would have to actually file with us if there's a change in address.
Right.
But because a lot of these people have moved off island, or they may have probably forgotten that they got a check.
Right.
They didn't do it, but maybe one effort that we can work with is work with the Postal Service, because the Postal Service do have forwarding address. From if any people wanted to move, they can submit it to the Postal Service, and with the IRS, I think they have a system where if it's mandatory, for example, a notice has to go out to certification to make sure that the taxpayer actually receives the notice. There's a communication or a link between the two to actually find out if there's really a true new address.
Right.
So
the other thing we can do, John, and I guess I'm just looking for some kind, $10 million is a lot of money, and to some people, that certainly can help, especially those that are old and are facing any kind of issue. But, to just let it sit there and not do anything, I suggested at one time that we cancel those checks and issue them to the next in line, the next in line in terms of who's owed. But that may not be fair if we don't exhaust, our opportunity to get that money to those people. Maybe run a cross-check with your MOU with the IRS. Here's a name, here's a social security number. Have they filed anywhere else within the IRS system a refund? And if they do, or a tax return, grab that address, write that person, and say, hey, we've got a refund for you for 2007.
That I think we can do. I think we can work with DOA to, because a lot of these taxpayers that if for example, we're dealing with 2008 or 2007 or
Right.
We can do a second effort by looking at that. Those taxpayers actually, if they have actually a more current address, in
Right,
other words,
yeah,
we can do that.
Sure.
And then, I think that if we can work with DOA and finding out ways to try and get it to the taxpayers.
Yeah, because again, I just hate to see that 10 million sitting there, and it belongs to the people, and I don't want us to be satisfied that, well, it's their fault. No, it's the government's fault because we didn't pay it on time. And now that we borrowed the money to pay it, we should really extend ourselves a little bit more to find where these people are. And there's ways to do it. You guys know. I'm sure you do. And so, let's kind of get a little bit more, aggressive in trying to get money back to the people. And again, I repeat, $10 million is a lot of money. That can help a lot of people. Yes, Senator Adam.
John, do you have a online where they can type in their social security number and like the amount tax refund owed and whether that refund is available already and what's the status? Do you have a system like that where people can come back online and check the status of their tax refund?
Online, no, we don't have that yet. But we come across a lot of issues where the taxpayer inquire about their refund, and that's when we actually look into it, and sometimes we do found situations where it was mailed to the last known address. Then that's the time where we communicate and give the taxpayer their refund.
I see. So maybe sometimes in the future we'll be able to have that ability where they can just type in their social and find out whether they have a tax refund coming to them.
A lot of them are done through email. I get a lot of email, inquiring about their refund. So that's something. I don't know if maybe we can create a website where we make it available for taxpayers to actually, like what you're proposing is to type in their name and put a note there that they filed a 2008, for example, and they're still waiting for their 2008 refund, for example, and then we can communicate with that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. And Marvin is a real life person in Houston who's waiting for, I think, his 2009 refund, and so.
Okay.
And he said he didn't get it in this last batch. So
if you're
I
in
think it's over at
communication-
DOA, sitting there, because I don't think he filed a forwarding address when he left. Marvin just left.
I guess what you can do is you can probably send it to have him to send a forwarding address or a new address to DOA, so either can actually send it to.
Okay, all right, okay. So I'm sure there's many different ways we can do it, but the point is that we got to do it. I think it's just completely unfair to these taxpayers that we just sit on that and not do anything because we like having the money in the bank. It's not ours. We borrowed it for the purpose of getting it back to them, and let's just find a way to do it. So I'm pleading with you and the administration to put some additional initiatives into this area, and let's clear those checks and get them to the taxpayers. Okay. All right. I have no other questions from that. We can then proceed, Mr. Rios, with the report that we'd asked in terms of the executive branch agency 8+4 expenditure levels. Is that where we're going to pick up?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The first sheet is for the general fund payroll expenditures. And after reviewing the numbers that were provided in the template, there are only a few departments that there were some minor changes because of journal vouchers, journal entries, etc. And those were the Ancestral Lands Commission, the Department of Public Works, Department of Corrections, Department of Youth Affairs, Department of Labor, AHRD, and Chief Medical Examiners. And so with this template, what we actually did is we went ahead and on payroll, what we did is we took the last 2 pay periods and averaged it out, and then went ahead and projected the remaining 5.5 pay periods.
Okay.
And so that's how it's done. And then if you look at the total payroll projection for these line agencies, which of course does not include the Department of Education,
Right.
GCC, and the total amount there is about 112.5 million.
So we expect we expect and project with some degree of certainty.
Right, and,
Yeah.
and of course it doesn't include those GG ones that for resignations for those individuals that are going to resign in the next 2 months.
Right.
The
Sure.
retirement, those that are going to retire and require a lump sum payment out. We're hoping to
Yeah.
some of that to cover the payment. Some of the lapses that you may
Right.
have on other the departments may cover those lapses, and then also for any hires that are filling other positions. But if you look at this and of course compare it to which is I'm sure what OFB will be doing is comparing it with the 2013, you'll see that we have actually held the line. There were some positions that of course we had to return GG1s, and we just basically held the line because of the reserve, the 15% reserve.
Okay.
As we get to the end of the fiscal year, if you like, we can provide you even
Sure, more current.
updated numbers.
Well,
updated
the
numbers.
source of this, of course, is the labor distribution report out of the AS400, correct?
AS400, that's correct.
Okay, and that's why we saw a little bit of discrepancy with the journal voucher entries and so forth. So I think this will work for us. That so we're looking at closing out the fiscal year at about 112, given our current spending patterns and so forth. Okay.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions?
On the
Yes, Senator.
operations.
Hold on. Senator Yamashita?
Thank you very much, Speaker Ben. Thank you all for returning, and welcome, Mr. Camacho. So, Mr. Rios, for 112,554,380, how many people is that? I mean, I was looking at different documents. I was trying to figure out how many people we actually have employed as Government of Guam employees. And then further than that, with the number of employees, I'm wondering if I've raised this, and I know Speaker Ben has championed this various times, but between Public Law 24-252, 26-109, 2% of our employees are supposed to be those with severe disabilities. And while I've had different people saying you can't ask them that, I suggest that we can, and there are ways to do it. And so, if I can have, or you can tell me where I can find the bottom line number of government employees that we pay of our tax monies, then I'd like to know if we're actually looking, and Benita's not here, and I'm thinking Benita's really the one who really can answer that question or address it, but that's certainly on my radar, and it continues to be. We have laws that we do need to uphold, and they really are very good workers if they get the kind of training and support that any employee. So is there a place I could look? I've been looking. I just can't find a bottom line number.
Mr. Servino from DICIT. I did call him. He sent out a memo to all the agencies requesting for that information. So I can go ahead and follow up with him.
Thank you.
With regards to that. With the number of employees, total employees, if we can go ahead and research that and get that information to you when we provide. So it's approximately 4,000. It doesn't include
I was doing some research on the health benefits. We'll be doing payroll. And we're doing payroll strictly on the general fund and on the executive branch. For executive branch, we're basically looking around between 35 and 4,000 at a time. I'm just doing the research, basic payroll records.
Okay.
So based on that, and that's the information, is fairly stable because we've been holding the lines on recruitments, and we're, and there's termination. I'm looking around, from between 3,900 to 4,000 based on the information I received.
Okay. And so 2% of 4,000 is?
2% is 800.
Right. And so I appreciate you connecting, Mr. Savino. I know Benny has been, and I also know he's been getting some pushback. And I understand pushback, but I also know really these people are very good workers, and they really can contribute. And I'd rather have them working and earning rather than sitting at home getting some kind of public assistance when they can really help work and get the job done. So I appreciate you, Mr. Rios, following up on that, with Benita, and I'll also do the same. So thank you. Thank you, Speaker Ben.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamish. Okay. Mr. Rios, you may continue.
Just to continue now with the general fund operation expenditures, which we provided here again. Again, the information here we received from each of the analysts. So the projections to the end of the fiscal year, each analyst had, communicated with the departments and found out what needs, what their needs are for the end of the fiscal year. Mm-hmm. And those numbers have been placed for here on the projection to the end of the fiscal year. We also, if you look at the power and water, you'll see that all of that is lump sum in the Department of Administration. Mm-hmm. Line item. And here, so we're looking at a projection to the end of the fiscal year of about $54.9 million.
Okay, so that's the total. And you indicated that these were developed, the projections were developed in consultation with the departments and agencies.
For the projection to the end of the fiscal year.
Right. Yeah. And this is...
And that includes encumbrances and would include encumbrances.
Yeah. And this is the gross number. This is not the 15% number. This is not the. This is not with the 15% reserve. This is the gross number. Right. It does not include. That's what I wanted. Okay. What would you project if you were given the agencies and the consultations that occurred? What would you project be? What would you project to be the final reserve dollar amount or percentage amount from these object categories other than the payroll with regards to closing out the fiscal year? Do you anticipate, I know that, as you go along, like you say, decisions will be made based upon the priorities of the departments and agencies and the resources available. So, releases of the 15% reserve will be made on a case-by-case basis and how well the departments and agencies can justify that requirement. So what would your best guess be of the final reserve number from the 15% reserve policy that we would close the year out at?
And just like from the first day of our public hearing, I was looking at between $10 to $12 million that I'm very hopeful that we could actually have as lapses and reduce our deficit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. John, I just noted, for example,
Projections, okay, Senator.
yes, no, I understand. Yeah, yeah. When you guys do it, you just miss the mark. When we do it, it's bad budgeting. Senator Adat.
John, I was just looking through here. You know, yesterday's report, there was, for example, some drugs that were found in official government vehicles, and then they conducted a drug test. But if you take a look through here, for the entire year, there was something like about $500 that was set aside for drug testing. How do we address, how is the drug testing charges being addressed? And are we gonna, is there gonna be zero also for I think rev and tax, there was like $238 that was projected for drug testing, and I believe public health was about another $100 and some.
They only want 27.
Basically, we work to do these numbers. You have to collaborate with DOA.
DOA.
Because they're able to state the process of getting the numbers that you're seeking for. So the numbers that we have here are based on working with DOA to get the monthly expenditures. When we were doing it, we knew that the drug testing was a little bit off, so we're still trying to work on those numbers.
A little bit. $500 for what, about 12,000 employees?
Well, the drug testing is, if there's a need for the drug testing and there's no appropriation, then there is, there is reprogramming that we can do within the department.
Yeah. Senator, just to clarify, for 2012, the appropriations for drug testing were all lump sum.
Right.
And I
At
believe
DOA.
they're under the authority of DOA. For those agencies that weren't appropriated drug testing, they go through the governor's transfer to move monies to drug testing should they require to drug test new employees.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And I
But
think
there
that-
are appropriations for these agencies for
Yeah.
drug testing.
Right, and I think the total appropriation was, I want to say 4,000, maybe more for, right? So, okay. Any other questions? Senator Yamashita.
Well, maybe Speaker Ben and Senator Adak can help me understand, but why are we paying for drug testing? Why should that not be something that the employee does him or herself?
Based on the public law, 20,346 was
20,000.
budgeted.
Yeah, 20,000, okay.
With the for the various departments.
Right, 10 agencies.
20,340.
I think that, if I'm not mistaken, the personnel rules and regs say that the government pays for initial employment drug testing?
That's correct.
Yeah. Right, and again, these are just for the test designated positions, drivers, people who work with youth and so forth. Law enforcement. And so our personnel rules and regs at the Department of Administration, yes, say that the government pays for that. So, okay. And so, yeah, the appropriation under the miscellaneous appropriation for drug testing was, as Matt stated, a little over 20,000. I mean, Bill. Let's recess because I'm already getting Bill's name wrong. Mr. Rios, you may continue. Mr. Rios, I just wanted to know, I understand it's a big budget and things happen and oversights occur during the development of the budgets and so forth. So I just wanted to note that in looking at the individual budgets for some of the departments and agencies, for example, we noted in the Department of Administration, when we were looking at their object class appropriations, there was no appropriation for power. And so we called them up and said, you guys are all the accountants there. What happened to the power appropriation? And I think they said they just missed it. So Mr. Rios, I think we kind of need to make sure that at some point in time we kind of get a number on the power, and we either plug it in, or you plug it in as as part of transfer authority, or some other way of handling that. So I would encourage the Bureau and the departments and agencies to kind of, we still have a couple of weeks probably before we finish up the budget in terms of presenting it to the legislature for action. So some of those areas in which we know obvious, I'm just pointing out and using that as an example that it is a large budget. It's a large document. We're dealing with all the departments and agencies. So we're going to find oversights and so forth. So and we're not going to hold the departments and agencies, unfairly to those oversights. I think we all know we got to pay. They're going to consume power, and we got to pay it. So we've got to account for it in some fashion. So, as you went back and reviewed this for the FY 2012, perhaps you may want to do that again for the FY 2013, and just ask the departments and agencies were there any oversights that you had, and then they review it with you. They sign off if you want to make any changes to the request. And we're going to ask that if you increase one, you decrease somewhere else, unless you increase revenues.
And if you look at page 2, it's pretty much the utility pool.
Yeah, you lump summed it.
The lump summed it there.
That's
so
right.
you're looking at about projected about close to $6 million
Right.
just for power alone,
Okay.
and for water about 686,000.
Yeah, and I'm sure that we could cover the oversight of DOA, in that $6 million with energy efficiency initiatives that were announced by this administration very early on, as one of the first areas which we're going to save. So, turn off your light when you leave your office at 8 p.m., Mr. Rios. No, when you leave now at 8 p.m.
Senator,
Yes.
I may
Bill.
have an answer to that. I believe the power cost is being charged to Department of Public Works as their oversight on public buildings.
Oh,
I
okay.
believe they also pay for the powers for Governor's Office.
Governor's office.
Complex, Government House. So
Okay.
I'm thinking that's why
That-
it wasn't budgeted at
There's
the
no. Okay, we'll look at that, and we'll look at DPW's request for power then to be charged against that. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Senator
Mr.
Tony.
Chair. Thank you. The departments and agencies, do they have, do they get to look at their utility bills, and so that they'll be able to determine how they can conserve energy or conserve water? Or if an agency has a water leak and the bill doesn't go to them and it just goes to this pool, how would they be able to determine whether they're actually using the water or there's a leak? And is there someone reviewing the bills and advises the agencies that they?
The departments are required to do the review of the bills. The difference in the past, they've always been responsible for the utilities, those that are in charge, because of the change in the budget formatting process. The accounting pool was just a process that we did to accommodate the budget requirements, but the responsibilities of reviewing the power has always been for departments.
So they still have the ability to review their
Right,
consumption?
and basically what happens is they work in collaboration with DOA, and if there's if the funding that's been appropriated for power has already been exhausted, then DOA would contact them for additional funding, and then they contact us for the reprogramming, if there's any reprogramming to be made.
I
So
see.
we're always involved because of the transfer authority that we can provide.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, I'd like to go back to Mr. Camacho here for just a little bit to kind of get some perspective on the federal side of dealing with our revenue stream as the Congress and the administration in Washington, D.C. Go into this campaign. They're also going to be looking at changes to the tax code, extending of tax holidays, et cetera, that affect our revenue stream, being a mirror code. John, can you just kind of give us, we're looking at an increase in the corporate income tax line in the projections, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, we're also looking at increase in the GRT. Over and above this year's trending pattern, even though this year we had our own mini stimulus of about 300 million with the tax refunds and the other bonds that we've issued that have been distributed to the taxpayers, which of course translated into money circulating in our local economy. But any of the discussions in Washington that you can see coming down the pike that would affect our revenue stream here on Guam, and how Congress may respond to that in terms of our delegate with some of the initiatives. For example, the Obama administration really has been the only administration that really has had the Congress appropriate money for a change in the tax code that was a negative hit to Guam, and they actually gave us the money to make up for that negative hit in terms of our collections. Do you see anything like that coming down in changes in the tax code? The Congress just, or the Senate just approved letting the Bush tax cuts expire for the upper income individuals, and but keeping them for those below 250, I believe. Any other changes like that that could impact the revenue stream? I know nobody in Washington knows the answer, so I'm going to ask you here.
The rates are actually going to go up, 2% for almost every bracket that we're looking, and we did look into that. How much would it affect? And how much would Guam actually benefit from that? And we came up with some figures around $50-60 million in additional. But since it didn't go through, and it's only limited to the rich, I asked my staff to actually look into it and see what the impact would that be. And I think there's going to be, if that thing, I think it's been passed by the Senate.
That's
I
correct.
think, and if that goes through, I haven't gone back to my staff to see what the impact would be going to the AS400, looking at those rates.
Those brackets, right?
Brackets, yes. And maybe if I do get that, I'll I can just let you guys know what the impact will be on the rate.
Sure.
There are other considerations that are being I guess, expiring, which I think some of the credits I think that will be expiring would be the American Opportunity Credit that probably would not benefit for us if it do expire. I think that's some of the things that they're looking at, and but there are also some benefits that are coming down that would actually give the small businesses some tax credit, which would be a relief for the small businesses. But I think that the biggest issue is the ACH, coming down in 2014, where basically if we do establish an exchange here, health exchange in Guam in 2014, the anticipated advance premium credit is going to be something really even more than what we actually pay for the EATC, which we're currently probably paying about $40 to $43 million every year, and I think that's the one that we should be really focusing, and I believe the insurance commissioner and John Carlos have mentioned that there's an estimation about $74 million of that credit that would impact the government Guam's revenue. And other than that, it's just more like a waiting game of what Congress will do by the end of the year. So as far as the impact, I don't think there's going to be a big impact because of that push cut being extended again, So that's about it.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Senator Yamashita.
John Reese, I'm wondering if you were able to see that email that I sent, and I think Director Gillen responded to about possibly allowing them to use unobligated carryover funds and ensuring that they get matching local funds. This was for the SNAP program where they need 19 people, but they've got the money, but of course we need matching. And they have some unobligated, as I just said. And they want to hire, but they're worried about, in the 13 budget, it's not there. And that amount is $333,000. Did you have a conversation with him and Benita about that by chance?
No, not yet, but I'll look into it. I haven't had a,
Okay.
I haven't talked to them about it.
I'd appreciate that.
I do recall seeing
the email, okay. Because I think that would help, and, if we've got federal monies, and we do have to give, that really would help. Again, as we know, so many of our families are on public assistance, and so that would help them. And then my other question is, were you able to speak with Director Tidegui, Department of Agriculture, about a reorganization functional charts?
Yes, and that's being discussed right now, just to let you know.
Thank you very much.
I'll keep you updated.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you, Speaker Ben.
Okay. There being no further questions, I'd like to go ahead and just, rather than adjourn this hearing, just recess the hearing to an unspecified time at which we will reconvene, and we will notify, we'll do the 48-hour notification for a reconvening of the hearing if we require your presence. And this just allows us the flexibility to continue the hearing and have to come back if we should have any additional need for discussion on some of the issues that we find as we go along the way in finalizing this budget. So at this time, I'll go ahead and recess the hearing, and we'll announce within 48 hours prior to the reconvening of this hearing. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, and si dismasi.